this is a process, a nonviolent communication process, which is kind of what it sounds like. It's a way to communicate nonviolently. So it's a way to communicate that assists us in not being attacking in our communication, not being defensive, and just really being clear in our communication to state factual things and how we deserve, or factual things and how we observe, state our feelings and state our needs with someone. So this is obviously a process that can be really helpful because lots of people get into conflicts in all their relationships. That's what we do. It's normal. It's healthy. There's nothing wrong with it. But the important thing to remember about getting into a conflict with someone is how we resolve that conflict. So it doesn't matter how often we fight, the intensity of it, but it matters. The repair of it matters. So there's a rupture and then there's a repair. And Badi Badenoch talks about this in interpersonal neurobiology, which is another brilliant tool, process having to do with neurobiology and how we repair and heal from trauma. And as we go through a nonviolent communication process like this, we are really rewiring our brain. We literally are rewiring the nerves in our brain to practice a better way. That our DNA changes as we learn these new tools and return to a loving place. So that's really cool. And so this process is really helpful. And as a therapist and coach, I had been using this process intuitively for many years with clients, but what I wasn't using is the last step, and I'll go over that step too. So let's just get into it. So there's 4 main steps in this process. And so when we are experiencing a conflict with someone, an argument, first, what can be helpful, so you can use this process in the moment, of course, that's going to be the most ideal to use it in the moment, right? But as we first start learning this process, it can be really helpful to work through it afterwards on our own and journal about it and really reflect on what happened. So then we can bring that information we learn back to the conflict if we are going to talk about it later or to the next conflict that occurs. So what we do, so I'm going to go through this process first as if I'm going through it after the conflict. So not with the person, but I'm going through it on my own and I'm going to journal about it. So first, I'm just going to write factually what I observe in that situation. So literally what happened in the situation. And I'm going to try to do that without feelings and opinions and judgments involved. So really what I see, what I hear, what he said, what she said, what he said, what she said, as much as I can, as factually as I can, what happened, what each person did and said. And that's it. So I'm going to go through that process and just write it down. Then the next step is going to be, I'm going to actually start by just listing the emotions that I felt during that conflict. So I'm just going to list them. The next step is number 3 here, is I'm going to state my needs. So again, this process here is going through how I would communicate it. So I'm going through kind of a step before that, a process before the communicating with the other person. So the third step is I'm going to just list my needs first. So I'm just going to get clear on what were my needs. So I felt all these emotions because I had specific needs or values. Okay. So after I do that, I'm going to make a request. So this is the part that really is going to be inviting a change, a process of change with me and the other person. So I'm just going to start by writing, what would you be willing to do if I'm writing to the person involved in the conflict? Would you be willing to blank? I'm just going to try that on and see what I might be willing to ask that person to be willing to do, right? So this is important too, because we don't want to put demands on people and expectations. We don't want to tell people you should do this. I need you to do this. Just do it, right? That causes defensiveness. And we want to be defenseless. So going back to the top, what I'm going to do is what also you want to do is once you write down those things for yourself, it can be really helpful after a conflict to also write the situation in the other person's eyes. So how that other person feels. So go through step 2. You already wrote what you observe, and that would be the same for the other person, right? Because there's no feelings or judgments or opinions involved. It's just what was said and what people did. So you go to step 2 and you write, you're just going to guess and you're going to speculate what emotions that person had come up in that conflict as well. So what were their feelings? And you're just going to list what you think their feelings are. And you're just going to guess. And you can probably, give a pretty good guess on what some of those feelings were, if you know that person. So you're going to list their feelings, and then you're going to list what you think their needs are. So again, you're just doing this process on your own, and you're just going to list what you think their needs in that moment were. So I had needs, they had needs. So what were their needs and values? So that's the main part of the journaling. Okay, so that's a big process. So just allow yourself to give yourself some time to go through that process and really list all the feelings and needs. And then you're going to go back to the beginning, and you're going to kind of just practice it out. So if, say you're writing a script for a play, you're going to write now the script of how you would like to rewrite this play. So if you were going back into that situation, or if you're going to go talk about it with your partner, your friend tomorrow, how do I want to replay this using this tool? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to state when I see or hear. So in other words, I'm going to write what I observed that person do, the specific thing or things that they did or said that caused my emotions. So that's what I want to make them clear. I want to be clear about that with that person. And I want them to hear me, right? I want to be heard. So I'm going to say, for example, when so I'll give an example. So when I see, this is the tricky part, because this is what we want to do. And what we often do is we say, you make me feel this, I feel this because you make me feel this. And this process cuts out that causation piece. And we know that nobody can make us feel any way. It sure as heck feels that way, that people make us feel a certain way. So, but people do and say certain things that trigger us to feel a certain way. But that is very different than them causing our emotions. The only person that causes our emotions is ourselves. We're the only people responsible for our emotions. So back to step one. So when I hear you say, for example, things about me, when I hear you say, you're a liar, you're a horrible person, I feel, so then I go to step two, I feel misunderstood, I feel attacked, I feel angry, I feel upset, I feel hurt. Okay, those are my emotions. So I might just say, when I hear you say, when I hear you call me names like that, I feel hurt and misunderstood. Because I need, and so this is where I state what I need. So what do I need? I need to feel heard and understood and loved. I need to feel loved. So if someone called me names, I wouldn't be feeling loved. And so I feel unloved because I need to feel loved and understood by you. So that's step three, stating my needs. So then I go to the last step and I would say, would you be willing to, and I would ask the person, what would you be willing to blank? So what would I like them to be willing to do to repair this? Would you be willing to not call me names? Would you be willing to state how you feel, maybe? Would you be willing to tell me how you feel without calling me names next time? Okay. So there is the nonviolent communication process right there. That's a real quick example of it. But when you go through this process, now this is not a one and done process, just like living the course in all its glory. We're here to live a life of love. We can't just sit around in our houses by ourselves and be at peace and feel love. We can do that, sure. But at some point, we have to live in the world. And to do that, we have to bring love into action. We have to walk the talk of loving communication and action. So this is an extremely powerful tool in how to do that. So again, you can find it at nonviolentcommunication.com. Down here, it's got a different website than where I got this one, but it's cnvc.org. And if anyone would like this tool or like this handout and isn't able to find it, you can email me. Well, this is a really helpful process, and I've been using this process with clients for years, but I wasn't always having them go through the last step, the step 4 of would you be willing to. Now, I should also say, sometimes if you start using this process, there may be, a situation, there may be, you may be so used to a certain pattern with that person, and that person is used to responding and attacking and defending or shutting down or however they respond, that this process can be challenging to shift into. So you might get to the last step and you're like, would you be willing to blank? And they might say, no, I'm not going to do that. And then if that happens, what you can do, don't give up. what you can do is you're going to have an emotional reaction to that, right? So this is the conflict again, beautifully laid out to invite us to do this process again. So no, I'm not willing to do that. That's stupid. That's a terrible idea, they say. So then I say, okay, and I take a deep breath, because it's really important when we're communicating with someone to take deep breaths. Whether that means just take a deep breath while I'm speaking. Maybe it means I say, I need a break. I need to walk away and center myself. I need to take a break. And I do some breathing for 5 minutes. Let's talk about this later. Or I do it in the moment, because sometimes we get so heated that what happens in a conflict is that when we get to a certain level of uncomfortable emotions, unpleasant emotions, and I'm calling them unpleasant emotions because they're not bad emotions. Emotions are not good and bad. There are emotions that make us feel good and bad, but emotions are not bad. Anger isn't bad. Fear isn't bad. It's just unpleasant. It doesn't feel good. It feels bad, but it's not bad. So if I get to a level of an emotion that's too high for my system to handle, what happens is my brain puts up a wall. It literally puts up a wall, and the nerves in my brain are like, the neurons are like, nope, we're not going to take any more information in. We're not going to be reasonable or rational. We're going to continue feeling this high level of fear or anger or whatever it is. So if that happens, I have to breathe. I might have to take a break and tell that person, I need a break. Can we talk about this in a half an hour or whatever it is? Because at that point, we're not going to be communicating peacefully. It's not going to be nonviolent communication. It's when we're blocked to receiving and hearing someone speak, that actually is a form of violence. It's kind of passive violence, right? Like passive aggression, to be like pretending to listen or just not listening, or just not being able to listen. Maybe we're not aware that we're not listening, but that's what happens when our emotions are too high. So it's really important to know when we're going through this process, this is why a conflict is not resolved, because our emotions get too high. Then we say and do things we regret, that we don't want to say, that we say and do things that are not out of love. So that's okay, because we know that means it was a call for love, and that we can remedy that. And so this is the remedy, this process. So if somebody says, no, I'm not willing to do that, go through the process again. So you start with the stating your emotion. So I feel completely dismissed or rejected that you are not willing to do that you said you're not willing to do that, because and you state your needs again, because I need to feel understood. I need to feel like we are growing here and compromising. So would you be willing to? And then what you could do is you could offer, you can change that request. So maybe you shift it, or maybe you make a different request, or maybe you ask the person, okay, what would you be willing to do? Maybe we can compromise and find a middle ground. So keep it open-ended. What would you be willing to do? And then maybe they're like, oh, okay. Maybe they're thinking, I'm so glad you asked. This is what I would be willing to do. And maybe they say something that you can agree with and you can be okay with, and maybe they don't. And if they don't, you can go through the process again. Okay. So see how this works. So if they say something that gives you another unpleasant emotional reaction in your body and mind, then you express it. So you say, I feel blank about this. So again, we're not saying you make me feel this way, you caused me to feel this way. Stop doing this. You need to do this in this way. We're not making demands. We're not being defensive. We're not attacking with our words. We're not name calling. We're not implying that they are causing us the emotion. So all this stuff is really important to be aware of when we're doing practicing nonviolent communication. So again, this is Marshall Rosenberg's process of nonviolent communication. It's a great book. I highly recommend checking out the website, the book, Nonviolent Communication. It's a really good book. There's also resources through that website. You can take nonviolent communication course. You can also be part of nonviolent communication practice groups. So these are like support groups that happen all around. They used to happen in person. I think they had them in like pretty much all big cities. Now I assume they're happening online. I can't say for sure that they're happening online, but I assume they would be. But if you go on the website, you can navigate to those process groups and see about how to get involved in that. So these are just like literally, so a group of people, small group of people meet regularly and they practice this process. So they bring up an example, that happened, and they talk through this process with the group. And they get feedback, and they practice the process with people in the group. So you could see how that would be like really, really helpful to do. So if you feel guided to do that, I would encourage you to follow your own guidance and what you need, and or just practice this process, journal it, practice it with a friend, practice it with somebody who you don't have a lot of conflict with, and just try it out, see how it feels, see where there might be challenging areas, go through an example of a big conflict with a friend or just on your own and see how it feels and get good at it. And don't be afraid to, and I have clients do this a lot too, is I suggest, if you take what you journal into a conflict, like into, if you go back, if you want to have a difficult conversation that might end in some conflict, you can journal this process and what you want to say beforehand, and you can bring what you wrote to the person, so that, because many times if we go through this process, it can trigger us to get back in the old way that we were communicating. So it's really easy to do this and just practice it on our own, but in the moment, it's so challenging. And so in order to practice it, we might need to, if we're having big, intense emotional reactions, we might need to actually bring that list of our feelings and our needs and the requests that we made written down into the conflict, so that we have something to refer to keep us focused, so we can take deep breaths and we can read what we wrote when we were in the calm state and our brain was receptive, our heart was open to growth and learning and listening, so that we can show up and be a better active listener and really hear what they're saying and manage our own reactions. So I recommend that. I think it's a great tool to use. And it just shows, like, it just shows your partner, the person you're having the conflict with, hey, like, I put a lot of thought into this. I have things to say and express, and this is important to me. And so, it's not, that's not a weird thing to do to, bring that writing to the situation. So that's a recommendation too. So love and action, this is the thing, is we can't just do this on our own, behind closed doors. We live in a world with other people